Does God know everything? I suppose it will be reckoned almost blasphemous to ask this question. Perhaps too Origen, 1700 years ago, went outside the bounds of reverence to be probably the first theologian who denied the absolute foreknowledge of God in view of the reality of free will. More modern thinkers have maintained that God does not know the freely willed acts of human beings until these are actually done. Some who would postulate within God a perfect knowledge of all possibilities would deny him a provision of the actual results which spring from the interaction of free personalities upon each other or upon their environment. In the New Testament, two kinds of knowledge are ascribed to God and also to human beings. Things may be perceived by the senses and we become aware of them. The Greek for that is eido, E-I-D-O, or we may come to know facts, grow to know facts, Greek genosko. Every day we experience both of these kinds of knowledge, which are likewise ascribed to God in the Scriptures. According to Genesis 18:19, Jehovah says of Abraham, "For I get to know him in order that he may command his sons." Then in verse 21, as the New World Version reads, "I am quite determined to go down that I may see whether they act altogether according to the outcry over it, that is, Sodom and Gomorrah, that has come to me, and if not, I can get to know it." Was it necessary for Jehovah to go down and discover for himself? None of us gets to know good and evil fully during childhood. Throughout life, one is ever learning more of evil and good. Literally, Genesis 3:5 reads, "Ye shall come to be as God, getting to know good and evil." Adam and Eve would at first know very little about evil. They must have learned slowly the difference between evil and good. What the statement does not say is that God got to know good and evil. In Psalm 139:23, David could hardly be asking God to know something he already knew. Let us rather put it thus: "Go on searching me, O God, and be getting to know my heart. Go on testing me and be getting to know my thoughts." This should be a continuous process in our own lives. It is going to take ages of time for us to get to know God, John 17:3. At present, we know extremely little about him, but sufficient for the present time. A being who contains within his mind a perfect knowledge of all that has happened within all past millions of years, and of all the millions of years in time coming, besides a perfect knowledge of all the millions of his creatures, all within one single second of time, is entirely beyond our comprehension. That God has access to all knowledge and information must be true, or he would not be all that the Scriptures declare he is. It may be that all his past acts are cognizable to him. We know that God keeps records of some kind, Revelation 20:12, although it is not suggested that these are necessary to him. On the other hand, it seems clear from Psalm 139:1-12, that Jehovah possesses a very intimate knowledge of his own people. We cannot flee from his spirit. We are joined to his spirit, in fact. Nor can we make a beeline from his face. Verse 7. At the same time, we may not overlook what is stated in Acts 15:18. The Codex Alexandrinus reads here, known, literally knowable, gnoston. To the Lord is his work from the eon, or from obscurity. Greek has a regular method of expressing the idea of being known, the passive participle, as at Galatians 4:9. Yet rather being known by God, nosthetes, of the middle participle, as at 2 Corinthians 3:2, known and read by all men. The codices Vaticanus and Sinaiticus omit Acts 15:18, but finish verse 17 thus, literally, "Who is doing these things knowable? from the eon, or from obscurity. Ancient history becomes knowable to us by means of records. To the Greek, to read a book or a record was literally to know it, or to again know it. Anagenosko. We know that God has purposes and that he will assuredly fulfill them in his own time. Isaiah 46:10 tells us that the only God who tells us that the only God who has none like him is declaring the end from the beginning and from ancient times things not yet done. Revised Standard Version. More accurately, this should read, declaring from beginning after things and from former time that which has not been done. God must know the end from the beginning is a certainty because he has all power. But is it necessary for God to be aware of all the intervening stages in his plan? In other words, would he not seem to us to be much more majestic than we have thought him to be if he did not require to consider intervening processes? The chess players. William James, 1842-1910, was a philosopher born in New York who wrote books dealing with introspective psychology, including varieties of religious experience and the will to believe. I quote from the latter. The belief in free will is not in the least incompatible with the belief in providence, provided you do not restrict the providence to fulminating nothing but fatal decrees. If you allowed him possibilities as well as actualities to the universe and to carry on his own thinking in these two categories, just as we do ours, chance may be there uncontrolled even by him, and the course if the universe is really ambiguous. Yet the end of all things may be just what he intended it from all eternity. An analogy will make this clear. Suppose two men before a chessboard, given the one a novice, the other an expert player of the game. The expert intends to beat, but he cannot foresee exactly what any one actual move of his adversary may be. He knows, however, all the possible moves of the latter, and he knows in advance how to meet each of them by a move of his own, which leads in the direction of victory. And the victory infallibly arrives after, no matter how devious a course, in the one predestined form of the checkmate to the novice's king. Let now the novice stand for finite evil agents, and the expert for the infinite mind in which the universe lies. Suppose him to say, I will lead things to a certain end, but I will not now decide on all the steps thereto. At various points, ambiguous possibilities shall be left open, either of which at a given instant may become actual. But whichever branch of these bifurcations becomes real, I know what I shall do at the next bifurcation to keep things from drifting away from the final result which I intend. The Creator's plan of the universe would thus be left blank as to many of its actual details, but all possibilities would be marked down. The realization of this would be left absolutely to chance, that is, would be determined only when the moment of realization came. Other possibilities would be contingently determined, that is, their decision would have to wait till it was seen how the matters of absolute chance fell out. But the rest of the plan, including its final upshot, would be rigorously determined once for all. So the Creator himself would not need to know all the details of actuality until they came, at any time his own view of life, his own view of the world would be a view partly of facts, partly of possibilities, as ours is now. Of one thing, however, he might be certain, and that is that his world was safe, that no matter how much it might zigzag, he could surely bring it home at last. Beyond all question, the kind of God which William James suggested is vastly more majestic than the God who is supposed to have planned out millions of years ago exactly how many winks and coughs and sneezes, how many words each human being should make or use, how many bites of food, how many drops of water each should consume, how many seconds and minutes each human soul should spend in sleep, work, toil, weirdness, or happiness. If all human life is just happening as it was planned by God millions of years ago, one must conclude there is no room in our lives for supplication to God. The pagan idea that God is virtually a machine running according to an unalterable timetable compiled before creation ever was, and the pagan idea that man is another helpless machine whose steps, evil or good, are strictly ordered by God, would destroy completely the deity of the God whom we know as Jehovah. We must not overlook that in lands where fatalism reigns, such as India, no distinction is made between sin and righteousness. At the present time, there are some of our fellow saints who have come under the same satanic blight, surmising that what evils they may do have been planned out beforehand for them to accomplish. When I put the matter thus before an elderly gentleman who gloried in the fact of Colossians 1:20, he retorted that Satan was only fulfilling God's wishes, so that any satanic teaching was really of God. Were Paul now present among us, he would denounce such devilish doctrines with real severity. It is not evil works which God has made ready beforehand for us to walk in, but good works, Ephesians 2:10. And it is for us to ascertain what these are. Nearly 20 times has Paul pressed the importance of good works, especially in 1 Timothy, 2 Timothy, and Titus. Says William James further, the inability to suffer of God is no Christian doctrine. The idea of a God who, having once made and set his universe going, has no further care for it is alien from the inner spirit of our faith. Again, a universe held in the hollow of God's hand is greater than one in which he would be totally immersed. God controls the whole world and the universe, yet, for the present, it is all too evident that he is leaving the nations to go in their own ways. Acts 14:16. Although since the time of Paul, God has been charging mankind that all, everywhere, are to be repenting. Acts 17:30.